Hey guys. This is part 7 of What If Naruto was mentored by Kakuzu and became a bounty hunter. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 16. Understanding. Fu bounded through the forest, only partially aware of the increasing density in tree foliage. Per Naruto's instruction, she'd gone around the battle, but had come across a disturbed trail that merited investigation. Hesitantly leaving the blonde to his own devices, as he'd requested, she was still in the process of following the trail when a burst of foul chakra rippled across her skin, causing her to shiver. The Jinchuriki stopped abruptly and whirled around, eyes wide. "What was that?" she gasped. Her only response was the Nanabai's grating laughter in her mind. Shaking her head, she returned to her path, trying to focus on the assignment she'd set for herself. She took a deep breath to calm down, thoughts unwillingly roving back to her fellow Jinchuriki and considering their recent run-in with him, their wayward mentor. It was hard, she realized, to not worry about either of them, even despite the confidence she had in their abilities. Kakuzu was the epitome of a veteran shinobi, having seen almost a century of how the world worked, and gained an equivalent amount of experience. He was well versed in the existence of most, if not all, major clans and Kekkei Genkai, and his mastery of the 5 main elemental affinities made him a force to be reckoned with. That wasn't even including the power he was granted by Jiangu or the extra lives he possessed. On the other side of the coin, Naruto easily had the most potential of any ninja in their generation. He possessed the same capacity for nature chakra manipulation and resilience that Kakuzu had because of the same kinjutsu running through their bodies. Even beyond that, he was the container of the Kyuubi, the strongest of the Biju. His resolve to continue forward in the path Kakuzu had set him on, and his growing desire to prove himself capable of following his mentor were impressive and admirable personality traits. Both were the only people who had ever really accepted Fu. If something ever happened to either of them, well, she really wasn't sure what she would do. ZZT, chuckled the Nanabai. Something already has happened. What do you mean? Fu asked aloud, ignoring the wince of pain that always came with speaking to the Biju. That chakra burst was the Kyuubi breaking free. The Kyuubi? Naruto! Fu whirled again, torn by indecision, but then shook her head. No, I need to trust that he'll be okay. Sentimental cretin. Fu pushed forward, ignoring the words of her prisoner and the apprehension that gripped her heart like an icy claw. Eventually, she entered a small clearing surrounded by lush foliage. In the center was a pit of broken rocks. She moved to stand at its rim, staring down at the rubble. Wonder what's down here? You have company. Fu glanced around to find a herd of deer surrounding her, staring her down. Okay, she drawled. That's new. One of the deer charged her, and Fu immediately ran through hand seals and crouched. Doton Dorihiki! The stag ran into an earthen wall which rose from the ground to defend the green-haired girl. 3 more animals charged her, forcing her to push more chakra into the earth to erect 3 more barriers, forming a box around the hole in the ground. Now safe from the deer, Fu settled into a more comfortable position and cracked her knuckles. All right, time to get to work. Doton Doryaha. Rocks and earth rose from the pit in a wave and were deposited as far from the hole as possible. Fu continued to excavate the pit with the earth flow wave, digging deeper and deeper, all the while wondering if Naruto was okay. Then an arm emerged with a pile of rubble. Fu blinked. Well, you don't see that every day. She stood up and leaned over the pit, peering into its depths. Far below, buried amidst the rocks and soil, she could spy a head of silver hair, a leg, and copious bloodstains. Haiden? She hazarded. Who's up there? A pause then. Hey! You're that bitch that was with the blonde and Kakuzu. Get me out of here! What the? She created a number of earth clones and then jumped into the hole, being careful to avoid the body parts strewn about. You look like you've seen better days. Heh, that bastard from Konoha thought his dogma could trump mine, but Jashin-sama always finds a way to reward his faithful followers. You should consider converting to OWOWOW. Be careful. Lifting his head by his silver hair, Fu brought Haiden's purple eyes level with her own and stared at him. You know, I can see why Kakuzu would want to get rid of you. That old bastard doesn't understand the tenets of my faith. Fu yanked on Haiden's hair, causing the Jashinist to emit a yelp of pain. I'd be careful with what you say about Kakuzu in my presence, she stated coldly, especially since he's the one who has to sew you back together. Haiden muttered something under his breath, but the green-haired girl merely threw his head out of the pit. Haiden screamed epithets at her the whole while. Hey! She called up, gaining the attention of one of her clones. Finish up here. Bring Haiden to where I am when you're done. Her duplicate nodded in understanding, and then Fu was off, traveling underground to avoid the line of sight of the deer. Feeling that she was a safe distance away, she surfaced from the ground and took to the trees, heading towards where she could sense the foul chakra from earlier. All right, start talking, she demanded. Willingly initiating communication with me? Buzzed the Nanabai idly. What an amusing turn of events. Talk, Beetle, she growled. Your sense of humor disappears rather quickly when it comes to the fox's cage. When Fu didn't react, the Seven Tails hummed disappointedly. As I said, that explosion of chakra was the Kyubi's. Given that the boy has never drawn on that damnable Kitsune's chakra previously, something must have occurred to make him so enraged that he is drawing upon it subconsciously. It is possible that the fox has some control of the boy's body. So what do we do? The Nanabai's strange laughter echoed in her mind again. We? It is none of my business if the QB influences your infatuation. Intent on trying to come up with a game plan, Fu opted to ignore the Biju's mocking remark. Don't you hate the QB? Wouldn't you just love the opportunity to rub it in the QB's face that you, the so-called great bringer of dust storms, defeated it? ZZT. Clever girl, manipulating my pride in such a manner. You truly are an interesting container. Fu took that as the Nanabai's agreement to help. As the greenery thinned to nothing and the powerful chakra signature that the beetle had marked as the QB's grew stronger, Fu grew more and more apprehensive of what she would find. What had happened? Why had Naruto drawn on the QB's power? Was he okay? And with Haiden around, where was Kakuzu? The former Takinin stopped at the edge of a forest of dead trees, the trunks splintered and broken. Most of them had collapsed under the explosion of some force, a great majority sustaining scorch marks upon their wooden surfaces. Fu stared at the scene, wide-eyed. What happened here? Roar! Fu tried to maintain her balance as the roar's shockwave blew past her. She moved forward cautiously despite her fear of what awaited her, concern for Naruto and Kakuzu overwhelming her sense of self-preservation. The sight that greeted her kept her momentarily paralyzed. Whole and partial bodies were strewn about a shallow, circular crater that was devoid of any sort of obstacles, trees, rocks, anything. Several of the corpses were garbed in outfits reminiscent of Konoha's ANBU, and blood was splattered liberally everywhere. One of the bodies, Fu realized, a hand coming up to cover her mouth, was the tall, distinctive form of Kakuzu, his usual head and facial coverings absent. She had little time to consider the old Nukanin's apparent death, however, as there was a larger problem before her. Standing on all fours was what Fu presumed to be her fellow Jinchuriki, his skin a mixture of red and black. Volpioneers stood atop his head, his eyes a blank, unseeing white. Red-orange chakra poured off of him in waves, accenting the demonic appearance granted by his skin and sharpened claws. Four tails waved behind him. So, the fox did take control, mused the Nanabai. How interesting. Fu watched as clawed hands of pure chakra erupted from the ground and crushed a cloaked ANBU in their grasp before he could escape. Only a couple shinobi remained in the clearing, and while Fu wasn't interested in their safety, she couldn't say for sure what would happen after Naruto had killed them. What's your plan? The only way we can neutralize a Biju is with another Biju. Unfortunately for you, your seal was not designed to allow access to large amounts of my chakra at any one moment, and we are unpracticed at working cohesively. So what? You can't do anything? I didn't say that. But you should be prepared to experience a pain unlike anything you've felt before. Pushing vast quantities of chakra past the seal to exert control will not be easy or pleasant. Fu grimaced but nodded. You'll go back when this is all over. I will not have a choice. We will not be able to maintain this form for long. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely. The kunoichi couldn't even respond as agonizing pain racked her body. She screamed as the nanobai's chakra flooded her system, forming a cloak of bubbling orange chakra around her body. It took on the vague form of the nanobai, with 6 wings sprouting from Fu's back and a long, whip-like tail extended from the base of her spine. Excellent! Buzzed the nanobai as he took control of Fu's body, flapping the chakra wings and rising into the air. It has been far too long since I've experienced flight. Hey! Don't waste any time! Fu shouted in her mind. Nag! The wings vibrated even faster, creating a whirlwind of dust that swept into the clearing and engulfed an unsuspecting ANBU. When the twister faded away, there was nothing left of the shinobi. The joy of atomizing your foolish race. Fu watched from behind her Biju's eyes as Naruto sent out his chakra arms at the remaining 2 ANBU, and despite their initial resistance, both were eventually torn apart by the Jinchuriki's makeshift claws. ZZT, I suppose it's time to step in and put the Kyuubi in his place. A gust of wind blew out towards Naruto, intended to catch the attention of the transformed Jinchuriki. Hello, KYBI, buzzed the 7 tails mockingly as Naruto turned his attention towards him. The boy roared in response, creating a shockwave which came close to blowing the other Jinchuriki out of the air. Come, my sibling, rasped the nanobai. We shall see who is more powerful. Chakra arms extended towards the cloaked Jinchuriki, but the nanobai used his flying prowess to maneuver around the limbs and dive at Naruto. Fu's body slammed into Naruto's, sending the transformed Jinchuriki sliding back several feet. Naruto swiped at the airborne Jinchuriki, but the nanobai blocked the blow with his chakra wings. The claw tips of the chakra appendage disintegrated, atomized by the contact with the 7 tails chakra cloak. Even the strength of your current form is not enough to protect you from my abilities, boasted the Biju. He called upon Fu's control over Doton, raising a series of earthen spires that angled at Naruto. One swipe of his 4 tails fractured the stones, leaving rocky stumps behind. Flapping his wings hard, the nanobai sent a tornado of wind at the transformed Jinchuriki, disorienting him. Flying close to the earth, he stuck his chakra tail underground as Naruto broke through the whirlwind and roared, dividing his chakra into multiple appendages to attack the cloaked Jinchuriki. The nanobai wrapped more chakra around Fu's body to protect against the limbs. Using his jailer's body as a distraction, his tail emerged behind the transformed Jinchuriki and whipped forward, the tip driving into Naruto's spine. He roared as the 7 tails channeled chakra into his body, disintegrating muscle and tissue that the Kyuubi was forced to regenerate. The Biju laughed as Naruto's body convulsed. Where is your boasting now, fox? He gloated. Said the pot to the kettle. You should be more grateful for my services. I could have simply left your infatuation to the Kyuubi's clutches. If you desire to bring the boy back, you need to reach out to him and help him suppress the Kyuubi. You can't do it? Neither our relationship nor theirs is at the point where we can reach out to one another with any effectiveness. We are close enough to make a tentative mental connection, and I can keep the jailer contained. However, I would recommend you hurry. This form will not last much longer. Will do. And thanks. That gratitude will not last long. Fu was too busy focusing on a method to reach Naruto to pay attention to her Biju. Due to the nanobai taking control of her body, she had essentially been relegated to sitting in her mindscape and watching what was happening. Now, eyes closed, she focused on the implicit connection between Jinchuriki and Biju, trying to extend it to Naruto like they had back in Konoha after meeting Gaara. She strained to feel some sort of bond between her and her fellow Jinchuriki, her partner in crime and savior. Naruto! She called, praying for a response from the darkness. Where are you? You need to get control. Naruto! Naruto felt like he was asleep. There was no real awareness of where he was or what he was doing, only the vague knowledge that his body was moving without his say-so. Coursing through his veins was a strange bloodlust, one that he wasn't used to feeling. Naruto! The blonde tried to open his eyes, tried to look around, but the unusual lethargy that had seeped into his bones made the actions impossible. Somewhere in the recesses of his mind, he recognized the voice as familiar, feminine in pitch with a distinctly urgent undertone. He struggled to move, fought to gain some semblance of control over his body, but only the darkness of his eyelids greeted him. "Where are you? You need to get control." "I'm trying," he wanted to shout back, but his mouth wouldn't open, vocal cords struck dumb. Every aspect of his body felt restrained, shackled by chains or glued shut. The lack of control over his own body frustrated him, making him feel even more helpless than when. When what? There was a block on his memory, as if everything that had happened recently, and was happening currently, was covered by a film. Vague images and shapes danced in his mind's eye, practically mocking him with their nearness and his inability to distinguish them. The knowledge that he should know these things and yet didn't was even more galling than the fact that he was unable to move. He struggled against the invisible bonds keeping him restrained, wanting to know what was going on, who and what he couldn't remember. "Naruto!" The blonde's eyes snapped open. "Fu!" He sat up like a shot, wide blue eyes taking in his surroundings. Water dripped off his body and from his blonde locks, creating ripples in the shallow liquid he was already seated in. "Pleasant," he muttered, lifting an arm and watching the water flow to his fingertips and then off them. "This is my mindscape." His gaze drifted to the wall where the web of Jianga hung, eyes narrowing at the lack of masks that represented his Doton and Suiten hearts. "What happened?" he wondered. "Damn that girl and that accursed insect!" Naruto winced at the volume of the voice, his head throbbing. He got up and turned slowly to meet the bloodshot gaze of the Kyuubi. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I don't answer to you," snarled the beast. Throwing caution to the wind, Naruto stepped forward and rapped his knuckles against the iron bars of the cage. "I think you do." The Kyuubi growled at him, a low reverberation that echoed around the mindscape. Then the fox's deep chuckling rang out, confusing the blonde slightly. "You're so quick to place the blame elsewhere. I only took advantage of your own emotional turmoil." Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose. Dealing with the fox was a taxing effort. "Will you stop speaking in riddles and just tell me what's going on? I'm a living mass of malevolence and other negative emotions. When you became enraged, you subconsciously drew upon a copious amount of my chakra." The fox paused, allowing another amused chuckle to escape. "This is just further proof that you are incapable of controlling my power. If that damned butterfly hadn't interfered, I would be on my way to Konoha by now." The Kyuubi rumbled in such a delighted way that Naruto was tempted to call it a purr. "The feel of flesh and blood between my paws, the futility of the ants as they tried to fight back, how I missed it all. It's truly a shame there weren't more victims to crush. How dare that insect interfere with my fun?" "Tragic," Naruto muttered. "You won't get another chance to take over my body again," he warned his tenant. "I don't need your power. I'll rely on my own strength and the abilities Kakuzu gave me." He turned and walked away from the cage. "You'll return for my power one day, brat," called the Biju. "Your mentor was unable to win with his own strength, and you would be dead without mine. Remember that." The fox's words echoed in his mind as Naruto's consciousness returned to the real world. Blue eyes blinked open slowly, adjusting to the vision of the open sky. A loud and obnoxious voice immediately made itself known. "Him up! I want my body back so I can sacrifice that heathen to Jashin-sama. I'm not a medical expert, Haiden. I can't just control when he's going to wake up. If that bastard Kakuzu had just prayed for Jashin-sama's forgiveness, maybe he'd still be alive to do this. Now I have to wait for this blonde weenet to wake his ass up." "Kaku, AGGGHH. Naruto!" cried Fu, leaning over him. The blonde was convulsing on the ground, his body racked with spasms from sitting up too quickly because of Haiden's announcement. Every nerve in his body screamed at him simultaneously, feeling like they'd been set on fire. "You might want to take it easy," Fu cautioned, wincing herself. Accessing the Biju's chakra apparently has some negative repercussions for anyone who uses it. I did say that you would regret thanking me. ZZT. Naruto watched Fu's movements with a careful eye. His companion seemed to be going through controlled motions, unwilling to move more than absolutely necessary. He slowly reached out a hand to her, but stopped when his own appendage came within his range of vision. Instead of the tanned flesh the teenager was used to, his skin was a bright red, almost as if he'd stayed in a hot spring for far too long. What happened to me? He managed. Fu looked distinctly downcast as she thought about how to respond. You were like some sort miniature Kyuubi. 4 tails, claws, ears. I had to use the Nanabi's chakra to restrain you. She rubbed a hand over an arm self-consciously. It came with a price. Looking closer at the girl, Naruto could make out the barest hint of a scale pattern on her arms. He clenched his fist tightly, gritting his teeth against the pain shooting through his arm. NNGGH, damn it all. Everything's screwed up. What would Kakuzu do? Kakuzu? Where's Kakuzu? Fu gestured to the side. I'm not sure how, but he managed to escape all the fighting. His body's over there. Yeah, shouted Haiden. Boo freaking who and all that shit. Now put my body back together. Shut up, snapped both Jinchuriki. They exchanged wan smiles. Must have been channeling Kakuzu. Naruto wisecracked. Yeah, Fu agreed. She glanced at the body of their mentor. What do we do? She whispered. Get over your fucking self, Haiden yelled. Put me. He was cut off abruptly as Naruto's arm extended and grabbed his head around his mouth. The blonde reeled the immortal's head in, bringing their eyes even. You talk too much, he commented, commanding a thread to weave Haiden's lips together. Much better, he sighed, tossing the head away amidst the man's muffled threats. Naruto pushed himself to a sitting position, ignoring the feeling of raw skin being stretched and the pain that came with movement. Pieces of his flesh were already starting to reappear slowly, spurred forward by the Kyuubi's regenerative powers. We move forward, he resolved. I think that's what he would want. You know. He smiled wryly. If he wasn't such a tremendous prick. Both Jinchuriki grew momentarily pensive, honoring the memory of their fallen instructor. At length, Naruto managed to get to his feet, the after effects of the Kyuubi's chakra a dull ache. Well, guess I should help Haiden. Maybe Pain will appreciate the favor. Wanna help? Fu offered him a smile that was partially contorted by a grimace. As much fun as that sounds, it hurts if I move too much. My body wasn't meant to use so much of the Nanabi's chakra at once. Naruto offered her an apologetic gesture. Thanks though. He looked around at the clearing they were in, noting the lack of trees, various holes, and puddles of blood. Bodies were spread throughout the area, some halved at the torso, others missing arms or legs or heads. So this is what happens when the Kyuubi takes over, huh? The blonde moved to kneel beside the nearest corpse, missing an arm and possessing a fist-shaped hole through his chest. Pretty gruesome. His eyes hardened. They deserved to suffer. Staring at the corpse filled Naruto with a sense of vindication, knowing that he had properly avenged Kakuzu despite not being fully in control of his actions. His hand reached out of its own accord and gripped the porcelain white mask decorating the body's face. He removed it to see the insignia of the hidden leaf etched into the man's forehead protector. Konoha. Again, the hidden leaf haunted him, perpetually spurring his hatred and desire for vengeance. The blonde was filled with a sudden compulsion to take the item, so he ripped the hydrate from its place and pocketed it. There would be time later to digest all that had happened. Right now, he was needed. He turned away from the scene and walked over to where Haiden's body parts were stacked in a pile. You've certainly seen better days, he commented, unknowingly echoing Fu's earlier words and picking up an arm. That was stitched back into the shoulder, the opposite one following with a suture just below the elbow. He worked his way through the rest of the pile until all that was left was the head. Watching Jiangu reattach Haiden's head to his neck, Naruto was struck by inspiration. I wonder, can Kakuzu's body accept a heart? The idea was a bit radical. Corpses certainly weren't meant to function by arbitrarily shoving new hearts into them and hoping they would just come back to life. Heart transplants were lengthy and in-depth operations that required careful planning and understanding of the cardiovascular system. But that applied to normal humans. Jiangsu, by its very nature, had altered Kakuzu's body to become adept at switching out organs with startling ease, even replacing hearts autonomously after the previous one had failed. Based on that, it wasn't so outlandish to believe that an implanted heart from another Jiangsu user could theoretically bring Kakuzu back to life. There was nothing to be lost from at least trying. He limped over to Kakuzu's body and kneeled beside it. Reaching for the Doton heart stored on his back, the blonde was surprised to discover that he couldn't feel the power of the earth-released chakra nature flowing through his body. A second feel revealed the lack of his Sueton affinity as well. Interesting, he mused, thinking back to the empty web in his mindscape. Did the Kyuubi's chakra destroy the hearts? Naruto shook his head. There was time for speculation later. Right now, he needed an extra heart. Not wanting to move, he called. Haiden, I need you to bring me someone. Alive, he clarified. When his only response was the purple-eyed man glowering hatefully at him, the blonde sighed. His arm shot out and touched the man, mentally commanding the thread binding Haiden's lips together to unweave. Body, if you would be so kind. Chop chop. TCH, you and Kakuzu are exactly the same. Perish the thought, Naruto muttered. Forcing me to become blasphemous traitors like you. It's a sin to leave a sacrifice alive. Naruto stared at him. Let me make this simple, he said, a tinge of frost entering his tone. Find me a damn body, bring it to me alive, or I'll undo all my work and have Fu put you back in whatever hellhole she found you in pieces. Got it? Haiden laughed. Like you could. Just look at the sorry shape your ass is in. If you do this, Naruto began after a moment of thought, deciding that threats wouldn't work. Kakuzu will end up being in your debt. The former Yunin paused to consider the implications of that statement. Ha ha! Then he'll have to allow me to give my respect to Jashin-sama without complaining. He walked past Naruto to pick up his scythe, which the blonde was surprised to find undamaged from the turmoil of his assault. My lord will be most pleased with my renewed dedication. Sure, right, agreed the blonde. Haiden's yammering didn't make much sense to him, but agreeing with the man seemed to be the best option in getting him to do as Naruto wanted. Haiden immediately went on some tangent that Naruto instinctively tuned out. How Kakuzu had managed to travel around the continent with Haiden for over a year baffled the blonde. 5 minutes with the Jashinist was enough to drive him crazy. Do you ever shut? Crap! Wooden beams erupted from the earth around Naruto and Haiden. The Jinchuriki activated a hasty violent wind palm aimed at the ground and ended up blasting himself into the air and onto a tree bough as the prison finished erecting itself. If the yelling was any indication, Haiden had not been fortunate enough to escape. Tenzo stepped out of the shadows. Well done, Kyuubi Jinchuriki! Are you kidding me? Naruto exclaimed, resisting the urge to scream in a mixture of pain and frustration. How did you even find me? I am highly attuned to the amount of chakra thrown off by the Biju. The output that I felt coming from this area made it easy to find you. Fucking fox. Naruto snarled in his mind. You have only yourself to blame. Come with me, Jinchuriki, and I will let your friend go free, offered Tenzo. That little pansy and I aren't friends. Couldn't have said it better myself, Naruto muttered. Still, regardless of the definition of his and Haiden's relationship, the former Yunin was the blonde's best chance to escape. Naruto was in no condition to fight, just activating the futon. Repusho had brought about a surge of agony. How do I free Haiden? Those wooden pillars are practically indestructible. He glanced to the side to find Fu gone from her original position. So I have to distract him, huh? This'll be fun. If you want me, come get me, he taunted. I feel like I'm gonna regret that. Despite the cat mask that hid Tenzo's face, Naruto had the distinct impression that the ANBU was scowling at him. The man performed seals, and Naruto jumped off the tree branch as a block of wood grew from the trunk. He looped several threads of Jiangsu around the limb, and vaulted himself to the next tree, wincing slightly at the impact. Your help might be appreciated, he told the QB. You complain about the effects of my chakra, and then you beg for my assistance. What happened to not relying on my power? Don't need your power, just your healing ability. I prefer to watch you suffer. Bastard. He weaved through the tree trunks as a series of wooden blocks chased after him, all growing from Tenzo's arm. All he needed to do was stall the ANBU agent until Fu could free Haiden. Meanwhile, the green-haired girl was staring at the Akatsuki member through the wooden bars of the man's prison. Haiden, apparently, was unsatisfied with her lack of progress. Are you gonna just keep looking at me, or are you gonna do something, you stupid bitch? Yeah, yell at me, that'll help. Ideas? She prompted the nanabai. 1. Tell the loudmouth to move to one side. Haiden, move! She was surprised when the Jashinist obeyed without protesting. Prepare yourself. Fu grimaced as the nanabai pushed its chakra through the seal, creating a pair of wings that sprouted from her spine. She vibrated them quickly at the Biju's behest, sending out a burst of his chakra before the wings dissipated. That should do. The cage keeping Haiden contained was now half the size, a concave shape carved out of one end. Haiden walked out of the opening, twirling his scythe expertly with one hand. Where's the masked fucker? Not far. Fu gasped, bent over on hands and knees. He'll become a sacrifice to Jashin-sama. Then he was gone, cackling madly. Fu struggled to her feet, breath coming in labored pants. Allowing the nanabai to squeeze out that last bit of chakra had told her exhausted body to its limit. She limped over to the wooden prison and leaned against it, trying to control the sharp throb pounding in her head and resonating throughout her body. How do we get out of here? Naruto stumbled into the clearing then, tumbling head over feet and ending up on his rear. He shook his head and got up slowly. We need to go, he said. Haiden's keeping Tenzo busy. You trust Haiden? Not particularly, no, admitted the blonde. But every trait that makes him a nuisance also makes him a good distraction. Besides, he continued, walking over to Kakuzu's body. All else aside, Haiden is still an S-class nuke-nin. He can handle himself. We need to worry about us. Let's go. Carrying Kakuzu was hard, Naruto realized. Granted, the man was over a head taller than him and weighed at least 40 pounds more, so the awkwardness of trying to travel with him was understandable, but still, Naruto was not cut out to be a pack mule. Especially not in the condition the QB's chakra had left his body in. Damn the fox! He cursed mentally, adjusting the placement of Kakuzu's body on his back. Without either of his other hearts, his ability to produce solid clones was non-existent. Unlike Kakuzu, he couldn't yet use chakra natures other than wind without the hearts, which was unfortunate given how useful they would be in the current situation. Struggling forward with his mentor weighing him down, Naruto glanced behind to check Fu's progress. His fellow Jinchuriki trudged in his footsteps, pained flinches accompanying every step. We'll never make it like this, he realized sourly. Oto is too far, and neither of us are in peak health. Working his mind furiously for a solution, Naruto almost slapped himself as he landed upon one. Dropping Kakuzu's body to the ground and ignoring Fu's half-formed question of what he was doing, the blonde ran through a set of familiar hand signs. Kuchios no jutsu, he uttered wearily, feeding what chakra he had recovered into the technique. Kamigenso appeared in a cloud of smoke. One black eye rotated so it could stare at the blonde. Hello, Naruto, greeted the reptile. Hey, Genso, returned his summoner. Sorry to ask this of you, but we kinda need a ride. The chameleon's other eye roved from Fu, clutching her shoulder in pain, to the prone form of Kakuzu. No problem. His tongue shot out and stuck to Kakuzu, bringing the corpse into his mouth with no questions. Naruto and Fu were quick to follow. Where to? He questioned, maw still open. North, Naruto replied. To Otogekure. He gazed cautiously at the surrounding area, paranoia gripping him. Haiden was nigh indestructible, and Naruto supposed his skill was decent, but ANBU were tenacious, and the Jinchuriki didn't fully trust the silver-haired man to keep Tenzo at bay for long. And if you could be camouflaged, that'd be great. Kamigenso rumbled unintelligibly and closed his mouth, activating the ability of the chameleons to turn invisible. From inside the reptile, Naruto and Fu tried to find stability with each step Kamigenso took. The chameleon's gait was slow, and the blonde was sure that the trip to Oda would take some time, but it was better than trekking even more slowly by foot. He leaned against the wall of the summon's mouth and closed his eyes, allowing the monotonous movement of the chameleon's walk to lull him to sleep. Naruto wasn't sure how much time had passed, but the chameleon's rumbling stirred him from his slumber and into groggy wakefulness. Why? There are men out here threatening me if I don't stop. Ah, troublesome gatekeepers. I suppose it's good that they're doing their job. You can go now, Genso, he said. And thanks for the help. It was my pleasure, Naruto. He disappeared, leaving the blonde to drop 10 feet to the ground. Naruto landed gracefully between the thud of Kakuzu's body hitting the ground and Fu's muted groan of pain. Apparently she had still been asleep. He waved to the guards. Tell your angel that Uzumaki Naruto has come to call on her god. The guards held a whispered conference before one of them disappeared. Naruto sat down in the dirt and waited patiently for a response. Konan arrived in a flurry of paper almost 20 minutes later, an emotionless expression plastered upon her face. Come, she beckoned. Naruto hefted Kakuzu's body over his shoulder again and followed the blue-haired woman, Fu beside him. Konan was apparently not one for small talk, for the journey was made in relative silence. The blonde wondered if she actually knew what had happened through some method privy to the full-fledged Akatsuki members, but was shaken from that musing by her divergence away from the path he remembered Pain's tower being. Where are we going? He asked. Hospital, was the curt reply. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Did he know about this? That Kakuzu and Haiden were in trouble? Pain is aware of everything. Anger boiled slowly in the pit of Naruto's stomach, but he restrained himself from saying anything else, instead focusing on moving forward with the burden of his mentor's weight. They reached the hospital soon enough, and Konan directed them towards a secluded room with gray walls and surgical equipment. Wait here, she commanded before disappearing. Naruto laid Kakuzu down on one of 2 beds while Fu sat on the other, body slumping in relief. Was it really wise to come back here? She asked. Do you have a better idea? Fu looked down. I suppose not. She trailed off as a powerful presence became noticeable in the room. Both Jinchuriki looked up to see Pain standing in the doorway, face expressionless. The orange-haired man stared at them, like they were specimens under a microscope. Finally, he said, I believe it is prudent that we speak. Naruto fought down the surge of anger directed at Pain, instead raising his head slowly to look the older man in his ringed gray eyes. Get me a heart, a shinobi's, a civilian's, a prisoner's for all I care, he stated in a dangerously calm voice. And then we can talk. Pain bore the boy's flat expression without any change in his own. After a minute of intense staring, he nodded, mentally contacting Konan and telling her to bring in a prisoner from the cells. The blue-haired woman appeared several minutes later with a man bound and gagged. He was forced to kneel before Naruto, hatred burning in his eyes. The blonde's own blue eyes were cold, glittering like ice in the light of the hospital room. There was no mercy present in those orbs as black threads wriggled out from his forearm and dug into the man's skin. Moments later, his heart was torn from his body in a spray of blood, the organ pumping solidly in Naruto's hand. He turned to the bed and placed the heart on his mentor's chest, directly over the long suture running from his clavicle to his pectoral. Jianga pried open the stitch and deposited the organ inside before withdrawing back into its wielder. Naruto waited with bated breath to see if his long-shot idea would work. Each second that passed felt like a lifetime, but finally, Kakuzu's body convulsed once, a rattling gasp escaping his mouth. The Nukanen's thread stitched shut the opening on his chest, and Naruto bowed his head in silent relief that his teacher was alive. Konan walked over and felt the man's pulse before hooking him up to a variety of machines. Heartbeat is slow but steady, she reported, although brain function is minimal. She turned to Pain. I believe the trauma of dying may have placed him in some sort of vegetative state. What? Pain placed a hand upon Naruto's shoulder and gripped it tightly. Come with me, he ordered. It is time for us to have a conversation. But Kakuzu, you have done what you could, Pain interjected. Unless you have extensive knowledge of the medical field. He exchanged glances with Conan, who immediately swept out of room. The gray-eyed man turned to lead Naruto down the hall, but paused in the doorway. I found this in Orochimaru's library, he mentioned, reaching into his sleeve and pulling out a tightly rolled scroll. He tossed it behind him towards Fu, who had remained quiet throughout the entire ordeal. I think you might find it interesting. Then he walked out, and Naruto had no choice but to follow. The blonde trotted to catch up to the taller man. What did you give her? Information, Pain replied, which I can only assume Orochimaru managed to obtain from the office of the Tsuchikage many years ago. Naruto opened his mouth to ask for specifics, but Fu's piercing shriek of, "What do you mean Jinten uses Katan?" interrupted him. Pain turned to find Naruto glancing back down the way they had come. Tell me, he began, causing the younger shinobi to whip his head towards him, what it was like to lose your mentor. The blonde's face morphed into an expression of rage. You knew, he accused. You knew that Kakuzu was gonna die. I did not. Don't lie, snarled the Jinchuriki, marching up to Pain and getting in his face as best as he could. I trust my subordinates to be able to fend for themselves, stated the orange-haired man. They are shinobi of repute who are not easily overwhelmed. You let him die because you thought he could handle himself? Akatsuki's leader stared the Jinchuriki in his blue eyes. Tell me, do you think Kakuzu would have been pleased to be rescued? Naruto took a moment to consider that idea, some of the anger leaving his system at the thought of his mentor's reaction to being saved by another. I thought not. He turned away from the blonde and continued walking. By the time I had become aware of the situation, it was too late to do anything. His death would have been an unfortunate event if you hadn't returned him to the world of the living. Zetsu can pop out from trees, Naruto retorted. He could have gotten there in a flash. Don't tell me it was too late to do anything. Zetsu is not a frontline shinobi. I prefer to minimize casualties. They turned a corner. Now you understand the true definition of pain. Naruto was confused by the abrupt subject change. What? There are many variations of pain. Physical pain, such as the loss of a limb or the breaking of bones. Emotional pain, experienced through the loss of those we are close to. Spiritual pain, often felt through empathy. Humans are, on the whole, a pathetic and fragile race of creatures. Yet, despite all these different types of pain, there is only one true pain. Ringed gray eyes turned to the blonde. You have felt it. Naruto thought back to the forest of dead trees, of watching the one person who had given him a chance fall to the ground and lay there, unmoving. The knowledge that Kakuzu, the closest thing he had to a father figure, sad as that was, had died had given rise to such feelings of hatred and agony that he had called upon droves of the Kyuubi's chakra and morphed into a miniature version of the Biju. The blonde turned blue eyes filled with comprehension towards Akatsuki's leader. You have realized it, Pain intoned. People, by nature, cling to others and create communities based on these connections. They experience sadness when people they know die, but there are others to help them move on, to fill the void. But for those who don't have such a network, the loss of a parent or a friend is keenly felt. As a Jinchuriki, you have a good grasp of what this is like. The death of the only person you are close to, that is true pain. And this foolish world and its wars know nothing of that. There was a lull as Pain allowed Naruto to consider his words before he continued. You are fortunate. There are not many people who can claim to have experienced such pain and then get a chance to talk to the person who passed. You should take advantage of such an opportunity. Pain began to walk away, but Naruto's quiet call of, "Wait!" stopped him. What? When did you know the true meaning of pain? Konohinin invaded my home during the Second Shinobi World War and killed my parents, who were civilians. That was the first time. He paused. Years later, my motivation to fight for peace died doing what he thought was right. He saved my life and inspired Akatsuki's goals. It's hard, not being able to tell someone how hugely they've impacted your life, isn't it? Nagato thought of how Yahiko only lived on as a puppet, serving as the deva path of the bodies known collectively as pain. He could only hope that wherever he was, Yahiko would be satisfied with the ultimate plan he had put together to bring peace to the world. Yes, he said at last. It is. Hey! Naruto called as Pain started walking again. You know that Haiden's lost somewhere, right? Of course. I know everything. Left alone in the hallway, Naruto found himself ruminating on Pain's dialogue. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the Konoha Hydeate, gazing at the metal thoughtfully. After a moment, a tendril of Jiangu slipped out from underneath his skin and, with a tiny application of wind chakra, scored the headband. It would be his permanent reminder that the hidden leaf would pay for all the pain it had caused him. Fu was as close to seething as she had ever been. I've been using it wrong the entire time? She screeched. Obnoxious girl. The Nanabai buzzed irritably. Shouldn't you be in too much pain to bother me? She had cracked open the scroll as Naruto and Pain had left the hospital room and started perusing its contents. It was apparently written by the second host of the Nanabai, the brother of the man who would become the knight-named Tsuchikage. And it had labeled Jintan as a combination of Doton, Futon, and Katan affinities. Outraged at this new revelation, Fu had immediately entered her mindscape to confront the Seven Tails. Why didn't you tell me? Don't you have better things to complain about? Your scales, for instance. I knew there would be consequences to using your power when I agreed to let you take over. She snapped. What I didn't think was that you would keep information from me that would risk my life, your life. Arms crossed, she tapped her foot impatiently, glaring through the honeyed bars of the Biju's cage. Now, are you going to start talking, or am I just going to have to read this scroll? She asked, waving a conjured image of said object in front of the demon's sight. What an interesting container you are, rasped the beetle. Fu rolled her eyes. That seemed to be the Nanabai's go-to phrase whenever she managed to surprise him. Fine. Many years ago, I was captured by the shinobi of Iwagakure. They sealed me into a human, but sealing methods for the Biju were not well conceived at that time, and I broke free within 2.5 years. Of course, in that time frame, they came up with new ones, and I was immediately sealed within my second host. He was adept. He came to understand my powers and found a way to channel them into an advanced chakra nature that he called Jinten. During that time, his brother Mu spied on him and managed to recreate the Jinten chakra nature for his own uses. He became the knight-named Tsuchikage, and his brother, Mai Jinchuriki, was traded to Takigakure as part of a universal peace treaty for my sibling, the Gobi. They apparently believed they could keep the status quo by controlling a Biju with more tails, especially since IWA already possessed the Yanbi. Regardless, the Taki shinobi immediately extracted me and sealed me into my third container. You are my fifth. Quite a colorful history, Fu commented. So you said that this second Jinchuriki created Jintan by channeling your powers. What's that mean? I am renowned as the Great Demolisher. Every beat of my wings has the ability to atomize people, to molecularize objects, to disintegrate the very mountains into heaps of dust. More boasting, what a shock, muttered the Jinchuriki. Didn't stop you from getting captured in the first place, now did it? The Nanabai buzzed angrily, the vibrations of his wings slamming against the bars of his cage. So that's what happened when I fought that guy from Oto during the invasion. She realized, recalling how the teenager had exited her body without an arm. Why did you never tell me this? I've been wasting all my time with this half-assed version when the real Jintan sounds incredibly powerful. You made an assumption. You were wrong. I found your new method to be intriguing. It possessed potential, and you made impressive strides in adapting it to your whims. For a human, anyway. Your arrogance isn't very becoming. Regardless, the bastardized version of Jintan you created became useful. The real version is highly chakra-intensive and requires a great deal of time to prepare. In addition, it is not extraordinarily conducive to your chosen profession of bounty hunting. No body means no payment. Did you just make a joke? You have proven to be an intriguing Jinchuriki, noted the Seven Tails somewhat reluctantly. This time, it almost sounded like a compliment rather than idle musing. I look forward to seeing where you go with this new knowledge. Thanks for being helpful this time, Fu said before returning to the real world. Hello, Haiden-san. You look like you've seen better days. Shut up, plant bastard. Aren't you gonna tell us what happened? Some Konoha asshole resisted being sacrificed for Jashin-sama's great will. Cowardly bastard ran off after attacking with a bunch of trees. So you weren't able to kill him? How embarrassing. Shut up. What are you here for anyway? Follow us. We're here to take you back to meet your partner. So the bastard survived, huh? Maybe now he'll have a greater appreciation for Jashin-sama. No wonder Kakuzu doesn't like him. He's obnoxious. Hey! I'm right here, asshole! Kakuzu woke up on the third day of their stay in the Hidden Sound. He was a bit disoriented and extremely grouchy, but Naruto was too happy to see him alive to care about his personality. Then the mercenary went and commented on how pathetic it was for him to be so emotional, and Naruto remembered exactly why the man was such a pain to deal with. In a way, it was almost nostalgic. That was when Haiden entered the room and proceeded to mock the former Takinin, resulting in an insult match between the two. Naruto sighed somewhat exasperatedly. Some things never truly changed. Very little had occurred during Kakuzu's bout of unconsciousness. Fu had remained hospitalized for a solid day, alternating between sleeping and reading the scroll Pain had given her. Even after recovering from her overuse of the Nanabai's chakra, she had pored over the parchment with a fire in her orange eyes, trying to absorb the knowledge like a sponge. Sometimes she had disappeared for stretches of time, though she had always returned muttering incredulously about ratios and 3 elements. Naruto found he didn't quite possess the brevity to ask if she had finally succumbed to insanity, and so left his companion to brood in peace. Haiden, surprisingly, had shown up not long before the end of the first day, talking loudly and complaining about woodfuckers and plant assholes. The blonde had guesses about the Jashin's irate mood, but decided that not engaging Haiden in conversation was a better idea than any of the alternatives. Konan had appeared each day to check on Kakuzu's condition, and Pain had returned once to drag Haiden away, offering to explain Akatsuki's plans in full to the silver-haired man. Naruto had been grateful for the reprieve from the immortal's voice. Despite the strange urge to maintain a bedside vigil on Kakuzu the entire time, the mercenary hardly needed protection, he thought sarcastically. Naruto had opted to roam the village hidden in sound and explore what it had to offer. The feeling of tranquility the village exuded had calmed the tumultuous mixture of emotions the blonde had experienced over the past several days. Otogekyo possessed a homey feel that Naruto, a wanderer with no permanent abode, found oddly relaxing. That hadn't prevented him from popping in to check on Kakuzu's condition every so often, but otherwise the rest of his time had been spent planning his next steps. Frustratingly, wait for Kakuzu to wake up had remained the constant priority, his only anchor to not leaving Oto at a moment's notice. Now that the man was awake, though, Naruto felt a weight lift off his chest. He sort of missed his teacher's sarcastic riposts and snarky commentary. Kakuzu's green eyes settled their stoic gaze on his blonde disciple, sliding wordlessly over the scored forehead protector he now wore and settling into an intense gaze into his pupil's blue orbs. You revived me, he stated questioningly. Using Jiangsu. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Intriguing. Then his gaze hardened into something akin to scorn. Your sentiment will be the death of you someday. Naruto spluttered, outraged. My sentiment will be my death? You died from your arrogance. And I saved you. Out of attachment, Kakuzu snorted. Not necessity. Resurrecting the dead is a fool's errand. You could at least thank me. Hardly. Hey, Kakuzu, Haiden interrupted. What was hell like? A blaspheming bastard like you definitely went there. I bet your wrinkled old ass got roasted. I would like a word with Kakuzu, interjected a different voice before Kakuzu could retort. All eyes turned to the doorway to find Pain standing there, face expressionless. The former Takinin rose in bed so that he was upright, back leaning against the pillows. Haiden snorted. TCH, fine. He pushed past the orange-haired man, his grumblings echoing down the corridor. Naruto glanced between the two men. Go, brat, Kakuzu dismissed. We shall talk later. The blonde hesitated, but then bobbed his head and left. Kakuzu waited until he was sure they were alone before saying, What business would you like to discuss? Pain shut the door and then moved to stand at the foot of Kakuzu's bed. Your student was rather worried about your condition, he began conversationally. He demanded that I get him a heart to revive you. He paused, turning his gaze to the closed door. Such dedication is impressive. Foolish would be a more apt term. Immortality is a falsehood. The dead should remain such. Pain returned his attention to the bedridden man. How dedicated are you to Akatsuki? I am a member, am I not? Yes, but men of your caliber, of Akatsuki's caliber, all have personal agendas. At first glimpse, one would believe that yours follows whichever path proves most profitable. However, I don't believe this to be the case. At least, not in its entirety. So I ask again, how dedicated are you to Akatsuki? Kakuzu stared at his superior, considering his options. In his current condition, there was certainly nothing he could do to stop Pain from killing him, though he sincerely doubted that was the man's intention. That meant that he had to engage the orange-haired man's word game and hope to give the appropriate answers. Finally, he settled on saying, I have actively pursued our targets and have not hindered Akatsuki's progress. And yet you would prefer that the two Jinchuriki remain alive rather than see Akatsuki's plans come to fruition. I dislike wasting valuable resources, replied the former Takinin slowly. But if their deaths are a necessity for our plans, then I will not stand in the way. Pain's gray eyes flickered towards the door once again. They have proven themselves quite useful, he commented tonelessly. Far more useful than I would have originally anticipated. Kakuzu managed to reel in his surprise at what he thought was the shorter man praising the two Jinchuriki. They have become interesting assets to this organization. Kakuzu's eyes narrowed. That is positive. Once more, Pain's gaze turned back to the former Takinin. You should be commended for how well you trained them. I would refrain from phrasing it in such a manner. My students would argue that my teaching input was minimal at best. How would you like a second opportunity? This time, Kakuzu couldn't contain the shocked widening of his eyes, though they quickly settled into a suspicious gaze. What exactly are you implying? I'm curious to see how far their loyalty extends. They have shown a strong attachment to you despite your current affiliations, and have been working for Akatsuki as long as you have despite knowing what our intentions are. Perhaps we can continue to capitalize on their usefulness, but that is only possible as long as they continue to live. Your plans have changed? Pain shook his head. No. But there may be a way to enact Akatsuki's ultimate goal without killing either of the Jinchuriki. It would require research, but the benefit of having two fully trained Jinchuriki on Akatsuki's side outweighs the risk. This is why I would like you to continue training them. And if they become stronger than you? The likelihood of that occurring is minuscule. Pain paused, then continued, This is not a guarantee that they will live. He walked to the door and opened it. You should leave when you've recovered. And take Haiden with you, his voice has become irritating to hear. Preaching to the choir. Kakuzu deadpanned. Wait, he continued as the gray-eyed man made to leave the room. What made you change your mind? This is a rather abrupt shift in attitude. Some qualities people possess are rare and invaluable, Pain replied at length, lingering in the doorframe without turning around. To deprive the world of such a person before he's had the chance to fully understand himself would be a travesty, don't you agree? Then, without waiting for a response, he was gone. Kakuzu was left to ponder the cryptic words of Akatsuki's leader in silence, analytical mind working to decode just what exactly Pain had seen in Naruto that had caused him to reconsider killing both Jinchuriki. 2 days later found the mercenary healed, though in dire need of restocking his supply of hearts. With a moderately confused Naruto and Fu in tow, and a whining Haiden bringing up the rear, Kakuzu and his troop departed the safety of Otogakure heading west. Ringed, gray eyes watched them leave, communicating a silent bit of fortitude for their journey ahead. Chapter 17 Progression. Sasori, encapsulated in the puppet body known as Hiriko, stared at the massive thing before him and momentarily lamented specializing in Kakuzu no Jutsu. Puppets could vary in sizes, but few were bigger than a human, and given that Sasori's collection was comprised entirely of human puppets, their sizes were already spoken for. If his laughter was any indication, Deidara apparently found the situation hilarious. "Hey, Sasori no Dana!" he called from atop a clay owl hovering high above the former Sunanin. "Better hurry up and capture the Sanbai. I know that you don't like to make people wait, Sasori scowled at his partner's mocking. He had expected to fight a Jinchuriki, not the monstrous turtle-like creature before him. Jinchuriki were humans, after all, and that made them susceptible to things like poison and kunai and other booby traps that inhabited his puppets. When he and his partner had ventured into the land of the sea 2 years ago, they had discovered that the sea monster torturing the townsfolk had been some girl who had escaped the clutches of one of Orochimaru's lackeys. She had, disappointingly, not been the container to the three-tailed giant turtle, but she had at least been physiologically human. Despite the fact that Orochimaru was gone, and so throwing a monkey wrench into the Sanin's plans no longer held the same sense of vindication, Sasori had taken great delight in killing the girl with his puppets, especially since the trip had been a huge waste of time. The former Sunanin sighed. There was little option available but to rely upon his partner for assistance. Deidara's explosions were far better suited to toppling large targets than his precision-oriented puppets. "This would go faster if you would help," he intoned blandly. It was as close as the puppeteer would get to asking for help without letting his pride suffer by being so blatant about it. The former Iwanin cocked his head to one side at his senior's statement. Then he laughed. "Ha! This is the ultimate proof that my art is better than yours, Dana!" he crowed. As Deidara wheeled forward on his owl, hands chewing on clay, and making it out of earshot before the older artist could growl a comeback, Sasori ejected himself from Hiriko and sealed the construct within a scroll. He pulled out another scroll, unraveled it, and unsealed its contents, revealing the form of the Sandaime Kazekage. Black granules immediately began to spew out of the puppet's mouth. "Let us begin." "Katsu! Satetsu Keshu!" the Sanbai roared. Deep in the mountains of the land of Earth, another Akatsuki member struggled with his own battle. The terrain possessed impressive divots and crags shorn from its surface, trenches dug into the rocky face by streams of water and lava. Hashigaki Kisame's cheeks puffed out as a torrent of molten lava came flowing towards him. "Suetun, Daibaku Sui Shoha!" Water spewed forth from the former Kirinin's mouth, solidifying the lava and swirling into a huge dome of liquid. The renegade swordsman merged with Samahata and entered the hemisphere with a chuckle, his shark-like appearance exemplified even further. "You won't be able to escape my Suiro Semiadori no Jutsu!" 5 minutes later, the entire construct collapsed with a huge splash, water falling everywhere. Kisame stretched as Samahata unmerged with him. "Well, that was certainly challenging. Kihi, though I suppose it's my fault for wanting to capture this Jinchuriki by myself." He slung the unconscious form of the Iwanin over his sword's tip and began walking, allowing the blade's chakra-absorbing properties to keep his victim unconscious. "Time to find Itachi. Hope he didn't get too bored waiting for me." Naruto dove behind a tree and pulled his legs to his chest, breath coming in rough bursts of air. No matter how many times it happened, the blonde was always surprised at the extremes his so-called sparring partners went to in order to train him. "Come here, you pansy!" Fortunately, Haiden had never really grasped the concept of subtlety, something Naruto knew frustrated Kakuzu to no end. The Jinchuriki dropped flat to his belly as the Jashinist's large scythe tore clean through the base of the tree. "Timber!" cackled the silver-haired man as the greenery toppled to the side. Naruto rolled onto his back to find Haiden standing over him, weapon raised to slash across the blonde's body. "Katon, Gokakyu no Jutsu!" He exhaled the great fireball at the former Yunin's face, temporarily blinding his opponent, and giving the teen a chance to get up and move away. "Suck it!" he taunted. Haiden charged at him, eyes bloodshot and face streaked with scorch marks. "Bring it, fucker! We can relish in the pain together!" Naruto ducked the sideways slash of the weapon and attempted to sweep Haiden's legs out from under him. Predictably, the former Yunin jumped, and the blonde immediately ran through seals for a wind jutsu. The strength behind the technique blasted Haiden out of the clearing, but Naruto watched the Akatsuki member throw his scythe into the canopy of a cluster of trees, allowing the coil of metal attached to the end to wrap around a bough. He hung there like an oversized fruit. Naruto sighed in relief, grateful for the momentary reprieve. Haiden wasn't exactly the most difficult shinobi to fend off, especially taking into account his predictability, preference for close-range combat, and easily exploitable personality, but his sheer resilience made him a rather tiresome threat. Attacks that would normally down other opponents from either pain or fatal blows affected the Jashinist but didn't stop him. In fact, Haiden often grew more dangerous upon suffering such inflictions. He was dragged from his thoughts as Fu went flying, literally, 2 wings sprouted from her back, past his vision. She turned to look behind her, released a short shriek, then took off even faster as a mass of black zipped through the air in her wake, firing condensed balls of air. A foreboding feeling of unease settled in the pit of Naruto's stomach. That can't be good. Hello, brat. Naruto whirled at the voice, hands already flying through seals. Doton, Dorihiki! Right-on, John. Son of a... Lightning burst through his hastily erected earthen wall, forcing the blonde to shield his face as shards of hardened dirt exploded towards him. Kakuzu grunted disapprovingly. You chose the wrong counter. Naruto glowered at his teacher. Earth was the best bet. The only thing it wouldn't stop was lightning. True. Yet because I knew what you were going to do, I attacked appropriately. Predictability kills. The blonde didn't respond, instead spreading his awareness to his surroundings. Couldn't you have kept him busy? He shouted as Fu flew back into his line of sight. Tried that, she returned, twisting in midair with her hands held at her sternum. A small pyramid was forming in her hands, the square base facing her with the tip pointing towards the thread creature zooming in on her position. She released the shape, but the mass that was Kakuzu's wind heart zipped around the assault, forcing Fu to release her wings and drop to the ground to avoid it barreling into her. Didn't work out too well. Clearly. He stared at Kakuzu, who returned the gaze evenly, arms held behind his back. Why hasn't he done anything yet? And why are his arms, shit? He jumped aside to avoid his teacher's hand as it burst forth from the ground, threads pulsing with one of the man's hearts. Despite the belated awareness of what Kakuzu was doing, Naruto managed to completely evade the black tendrils of Jiangsu. He had an instant to be proud of this accomplishment before the man's fingers clasped around Fu's ankle. The realization that he hadn't even been the thread user's main target was further proven when the Nukenin stated, "You should enjoy Haiden's company," and flung her away. Fu managed to right herself in midair by sprouting the Nanabai's wings again, but Haiden came plunging out of the sky with a mad cackle, sides tips angled to impale her. The green-haired girl dodged, but she was blown away by a blast of air from Kakuzu's returning thread creature. Naruto almost called out to his companion, but then decided he had more pressing issues to deal with and turned to face his teacher. A wise decision, commented the mercenary. Now come. That was a familiar statement. Naruto had honestly lost track of how many times Kakuzu had uttered those words, the taunting beckon, not the half-praise regarding his decision, over the past 2 years. And what a time it had been. 2 years ago, Naruto honestly would never have expected any sort of assistance from his wayward teacher. They had, for all intents and purposes, gone different ways following Haiden's recruitment to Akatsuki. Kakuzu was Naruto's past, and while he would always have a role in the younger male's life, the black and white of it was that the two were on different sides of the fence, ignoring the fact that Naruto was working for Akatsuki, of course. Even disregarding that, Kakuzu's rather indirect teaching methodology and his words about Naruto learning to control Jiangsu on his own had pretty much guaranteed that Naruto would be forced to teach himself to get stronger. Yet here they were, traversing the area far west of the lands of earth and wind, currently in the land of demons, with Kakuzu, and a rather reluctant Haiden, training him to be as strong as he could be. Naruto wasn't sure what brought about the sudden about-face in Kakuzu's attitude towards his training, and the one time he mentioned it, not long after their departure from the hidden sound, the older man had remained tight-lipped. Knowing his mentor's personality, Naruto hadn't asked again. If the former Takinin didn't want to reveal anything, there was nothing the blonde could do to make him spill. So he had taken everything in stride, trusting in the fact that Kakuzu wouldn't steer them wrong. It was apt to say that Kakuzu definitely knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, the man's hands-on approach to training was brutal. There was time to rest and eat, because the necessities kept all shinobi aware and in peak condition, but most of the other remaining time was spent practicing. The things that the two Jinchuriki learned, though, Naruto almost couldn't believe how much information Kakuzu had at his disposal. Fu's reservoir of Doton techniques had increased to include every earth-related jutsu Kakuzu had learned in his 92 years of life. While her aptitude for pure wind manipulation had remained a bit lackluster, her collection of personal dust release techniques had expanded to compensate. Even more impressive was the self-taught manner in which she had learned the true version of Jinton, and had proceeded to begin integrating the atomizing power of the nanabi into her dust jutsu. It was a taxing effort, given the amount of shape manipulation required for the actual Jinton, and removing that aspect while keeping the same overall effect and incorporating it into her modified dust techniques was apparently beyond difficult. Beyond that, Kakuzu had pushed her into drawing on the Biju's chakra, little by little, until she could utilize the nanabi's chakra cloak up to 5 tails, without asking for the beetle's assistance, or materialize 2 solid tails as wings to fly. According to Fu, the 7 tails had been surprisingly helpful during the training, answering any questions she had about his chakra and what her limits were. Naruto wished the Kyuubi was as amicable, but he had undergone his own intense training regimen even without the Biju's assistance. Kakuzu had rescinded his idea to let Naruto learn the intricacies of Jiangsu on his own, instead tutoring the boy in how to bring out the kinjutsu's full strength. His body had paid the price for such power, obtaining long sutures across his chest, back, and at intervals along his arms, but the benefits far outweighed the costs. Naruto could now access the long-armed form that Kakuzu admitted to defaulting to after losing 2 hearts, as well as the long-range form his mentor had died in, albeit on a smaller scale. On top of that, Kakuzu had told him how to extrude his hearts into masked creatures capable of autonomous destruction. That, Naruto thought, was perhaps the best part, especially since he'd finally claimed all 5 affinities at Kakuzu's behest. He'd grasped Right-dun relatively easily, finding the element as easy to call upon as his Swait-dun ninjutsu, which was strange, he considered, given his body's natural inclination towards Futon, but learning Katon had been as big a struggle as Doton. Despite the difficulties, he'd become well-rounded in each of the nature manipulations with Kakuzu's guidance, and his kinjutsu's autonomy meant that he could, say, call upon his fire heart to attack for him without worrying about collecting the chakra in his chest perfectly for exhalation into actual fire attacks. The bounty hunter had even given him some taijutsu lessons to complement the unique body structure granted to him by Jiangsu, but had made sure to emphasize that with his chakra capacity, ninjutsu was his ace in the hole to a fight, Naruto's interpretation, not Kakuzu's exact words. Of course, all of that had been the comparatively easy part. The true challenge had been using the new skills in practice. And Kakuzu was apparently under the belief that dangerous situations bred more impulse and creativity, as Naruto and Fu were forced to repeatedly spar against him and Haiden. Naruto wasn't exactly sure where his and Fu's skill levels were with respect to the worldwide listing of shinobi classes, but he did know that Kakuzu and Haiden fully deserved their labels of S-class. Haiden, rather surprisingly, had more moves than just swinging his scythe around in seemingly aimless patterns and screaming like a banshee, though using them didn't give him as much pleasure as the close combat method of fighting did. As for Kakuzu, well, his teacher was, quite simply, a beast. The revelation wasn't exactly a new one. Certainly, Naruto had been aware of Kakuzu's skills for years, the knowledge of what the mercenary was capable of always in the back of his mind. But knowing of it and living it every day for 2 years was a huge difference. Fighting with his teacher day in and day out, the blonde wasn't even sure how he had been killed by the Konoha Anbu, outnumbered or not. The man was just that ridiculously powerful. And he liked to prove it. Both thread users ran through seals, masks popping up on their shoulders with elemental techniques prepared. Katon Zukoku, Sway-tun, Surgeon Hiki. Kakuzu hummed thoughtfully as the attacks clashed and cancelled each other out. Your intuitiveness has improved. That almost sounded like a compliment. Naruto jested. Did I earn the right to learn it yet? Kakuzu's deadpan stare was his only response. The blonde gave an internal sigh of resigned acceptance. There were only two things Kakuzu had absolutely refused to teach him. One was the secret to creating and manipulating hardened water, which Naruto was okay with not learning given his original affinity for attacking with air. The other was the collection of ultimate techniques the former Takinin had created for each of the elemental chakra natures, Raiten, Jan, Katan, Zukoku, Futon, Atsugai, and some water one that Naruto had never seen, but had been assured was equally as powerful. Doton, Domu apparently, was a technique that had been recreated from an existing earth jutsu, and not something that Kakuzu kept closely guarded. When the blonde had originally asked about learning wind release, pressure damage, wind was still his go-to element of choice. Kakuzu had merely replied in the negative and stated that he would have to come up with his own ultimate techniques. He had been disappointed, but then excited at the prospect. Inspiration so far had been slim, but Naruto retained hope for the future. I admit that you have come a fair way, Kakuzu intoned. But considering where you started, such a feat is not as impressive as it sounds. Naruto stopped the scowl from spreading over his features. As Kakuzu had dedicated his time to teaching him, and as Naruto had grown both physically and mentally, the blonde had learned to choose his battles with the taller man with greater care. They still bantered back and forth, trading flat insults and deadpan riposts. The verbal sparring was practically a given with their relationship, but much of the anger and antagonism Naruto had heard in their past exchanges had dissipated. Kakuzu's put-downs, he noticed, carried far less venom than he had thought when he was younger. Ah, so you admit I've made improvements, quipped the teenager. He could practically imagine Kakuzu rolling his eyes in muted aggravation. If you consider yourself so improved, Kakuzu stated, then perhaps you should show me your skill with Jiangyu. The blonde couldn't repress the shudder that ran down his spine of its own accord. Every time he had tried utilizing the Kenjutsu's power against his teacher, whether by summoning the thread creatures or by using one of its forms, Kakuzu had proceeded to beat him down even more viciously than usual. Normally by using his control over the threads to do so. Naruto thought that it was perhaps the former Takinin's nonverbal method of communicating that even if the blonde had a new trick up his sleeve, Kakuzu was still the superior shinobi. Yeah, I think I'll pass, he commented, forming seals. Raiten Jibashi. Kakuzu watched the incoming wave of electricity with his usual disinterest. Before he could decide how to counter the attack, Pain's voice sounded in his head. Kakuzu Haiden, it is time to perform the sealing of the Sanbai and Yanbi. It will take 6 days total to do both. After the ceremony is over, you will return to your usual assignments. Understood, Kakuzu replied, relishing in Naruto's look of surprise as his wind heart returned from behind him and negated the lightning release, electromagnetic murder. Your beatdown will have to wait, brat, he directed towards his pupil. It seems that Haiden and I have been recalled to our duties. Naruto schooled his features and nodded, following Kakuzu as the old Nukenin went to track down his partner. As they trudged through the greenery of the land of demons, Naruto thought back to everything that he owed his mentor. Hey, he mentioned quietly, watching as the former Takinin's shoulders shifted to indicate he was listening. Thanks for doing all this. I know it's not really your style, but I really appreciate it. Kakuzu remained silent, not that Naruto had expected anything else. The man had never really been one for gratitude or other emotional platitudes, what he deemed to be sentimentality. So when they reached an open area where Haiden and Fu were dodging one another's attacks, Naruto was surprised to hear Kakuzu start talking. The world is a dangerous place. Most shinobi do not get to experience the hardships of old age, as they are often cut down either in or shortly past their prime. Jinchuriki are statistically less likely to reach such an age, given the apparent propensity for nations to use them as weapons in war. He paused, considered his words, then continued. It has been decided that you deserve the opportunity to break from that cycle, and as I am likely one of the oldest active shinobi in existence, if not to have ever existed, it would be remiss of me to not grant you every possible advantage, All you can do now is endure. Endure until the time when you lack the fortitude to continue on. He glanced at the blond boy. At that point, I would come kill you myself. I would expect you to have quite the bounty on your head. His piece said. Kakuzu turned his green eyes to settle on Haiden. Haiden, you heard, leader. He addressed the Jashinist. It is time for us to depart from the children. TCH, and just when it was getting interesting, too. As Kakuzu and Haiden began to walk into a more sheltered area of the land of demons, the bounty hunter tossed one last tidbit of advice at his disciple. Naruto, always remain aware of your surroundings. And then the duel was gone. Fu walked up to him as Naruto mentally interpreted Kakuzu's parting words. Akatsuki is on the move again. Be prepared for any eventuality. You are still a target. Message received, Kakuzu, he thought. So, he said, turning to Fu, where do we go now? The green-haired girl didn't respond, instead keeping her gaze focused on the ground, a pensive expression decorating her features. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Fu? She looked up at him, orange eyes filled with resolve. I think it's time we split up, she announced. Naruto blinked. What? We should go our own ways, she reiterated, voice growing more determined. Naruto got the distinct impression that she had given this idea much thought. Akatsuki's going to eventually come after us. It's better if we're separate so that capturing both of us is more difficult, and they won't be able to find out where the other is if they do get one of us. Naruto opened his mouth to object, to say that sticking together gave them a better chance for survival, but then closed it when he realized nothing he could say was going to make a difference. Fu clearly wasn't going to back down. Fine, he agreed. We split up from here. A sudden idea springing forth, he reached into his pocket and grabbed the scroll used to contain corpses. Here, he said, tossing the object to his companion. Fu caught it with a questioning look. Don't you want this? The blonde's mouth broke into a wide grin. Oh, I'm not going to need that for what I'm going to do. You take it and continue to collect money. I have a different goal in mind. All right. When Fu continued to stare at him unsurely, Naruto raised an eyebrow again. Something else? She started, taking a measured step forward. The space between them was minimal, and Naruto found his bubble of personal space distinctly encroached upon. You saved me from a horrible life a long time ago. This isn't exactly the lap of luxury, you know. And I really appreciate that. I don't know what my life would be like if you hadn't come to Taki and rescued me. Hell, I might have been killed by Akatsuki by now, and I just... She broke off, and Naruto opened his mouth to prompt her to continue, but she didn't give him the chance, closing the gap between them and kissing him soundly. Blue eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected contact. Before he could even really comprehend the situation, Fu disconnected their lips and took a step backwards. Naruto met her orange eyes wordlessly as the female Jinchuriki whispered, "Thank you," and then disappeared in a swirl of dust. Naruto would admit to being unbelievably confused. His best friend had kissed him not 2 days ago and then left to go off on her own adventure. For all he knew, he might never see Fu again. Given that he had never before encountered such a convoluted situation, his perturbation was rather unsurprising, even understandable. Now he at least had an explanation for some of the stranger expressions and actions that Fu had often graced him with. Not that he knew what to do with this new information. He was 16 now, and far more aware of the opposite gender than he had been 2 years ago. Given that wasn't saying much since his lifestyle left little room for personal interaction with anyone, let alone females, but Fu had always remained a constant in his life. It would be a lie to say that he hadn't considered his fellow Jinchuriki attractive, but with the main focus of his attention on Kakuzu's training regimen, the blonde had merely written off such thoughts as fleeting fancies. That, apparently, had been a mistake. Fu possessed a certain appeal that Naruto found intriguing. She was lithe and slender for her almost 17 years of age, with only an inch of height over Naruto's growing 5 feet 5 inches frame. Despite Kakuzu's comments on how she looked like a 12-year-old boy, Fu still retained an unknown quality that Naruto discerned as alluring. Perhaps it was the fact that there wasn't really room for romance on the road, and puberty had caused him to latch on to the nearest female form. Or maybe it was that Fu was a Jinchuriki who had experienced much of the life Naruto had while working with Kakuzu, and thus knew of the dangers associated with the road ahead of them. Plus, it was unlikely that many people would want to be romantically involved with a demon container when Naruto refused to think if he could finally settle down somewhere. There were too many similarities between his and Fu's personalities and past to not make them an ideal pairing. Of course, none of that actually meant that the blonde knew how to react to Fu kissing him. Especially since she hadn't really given him time to try discussing with her what the hell she was thinking. Women, he muttered, abandoning the slog-ridden marshes of the land of demons for the craggy wasteland of the land of earth. Why did they have to be so damn confusing? You will not be having progeny with her. Wonderful, Naruto thought irately. The Kyuubi was deciding to make his opinion known, like he needed a bigger headache. And why not? He asked, not even considering the implications of arguing against such a statement. I refuse to allow any vessel of mine to procreate with anyone tainted by that infernal butterfly. But if I was interested in a Jinchuriki tainted by any of the other Biju, you'd be okay with it? I will find a way to destroy you. Naruto smirked to himself. And the point goes to me. Besides, he mentioned, I'm 16. This is hardly the time to be considering reproduction. The fox snorted. You humans are all the same. You partake in pleasures of the flesh and lose sight of everything else. One bat of her eyes and you'll have no other thoughts but of ravishing her. The teenager opened and closed his mouth wordlessly, trying to banish the images the Kyuubi's words had conjured in his mind. Just shut up. Laughter echoed in his mind, the fox clearly finding amusement in one-upping his jailer. Your inadequacy regarding a concept such as intercourse is highly amusing. Naruto shook his head in an effort to ignore the Biju. There was no point dwelling on something that he couldn't do anything about right now anyway. Fu was off on a solo bounty hunting adventure, leaving him with a jumble of confused thoughts and emotions regarding her. And his own goal. Now that he was well trained in the ways of Jianggu and capable of utilizing all the different elements, the blonde felt confident enough to start exacting his vengeance upon the hidden leaf. It was going to be fun. Naruto jumped behind a rocky outcropping as several figures became apparent in the distance. Soon enough, a group of 8 Iwanin came to a stop not too far from his position. Which way? Asked one of them. Another one took a moment to close his eyes and focus on his surroundings. Naruto melded into the ground, as if such a method would help him from being sensed. Luckily, it seemed as if the group had a specific target in mind and the blonde found himself going unnoticed. Over there, the ninja stated after a moment. Let's move. Akatsuki already has a head start on us, and we can't let them take Rashi like they took Han. Iwagakure needs a Jinchuriki to match the might of the other hidden villages. Naruto rose from the earth, ears pricked as the squad of hidden rock shinobi moved out. Someone's gonna have some company real soon. A giant grin stretched across his face as a thought occurred to him. Oh, Pain is so gonna owe me for this. He snickered. He bounded after the octet, extruding his earth heart, and commanding the creature to go on ahead of him. The mass of threads immediately burrowed underground to cut off the shinobi per Naruto's instructions. Several minutes later, the blonde heard his quarry shouting in surprise as a massive stone wall rose in their path. Gentlemen, he announced, drawing their attention as he alit on a crag and used chakra to glue himself to the slanted surface. I'm sorry to inform you that your journey is for naught. He paused, cupping his chin thoughtfully. Actually, I stand corrected. A wicked gleam shone in his blue eyes. I'm not really all that sorry. It's just a kid, observed one of the shinobi. Hey kid, if you don't leave now we'll be forced to take you out, another one informed him. Naruto stared at them blankly. Man, death threats just roll right off, you idiots. He massaged his forehead with the fingers on one hand and shook his head sadly, muted chuckles escaping his lips. Great, now I sound like Kakuzu. Arrogance and insults all in one. Don't say we didn't warn you, kid. The man Naruto assumed to be captain addressed the rest of his squadron. Finish this quickly. Oh, I will, Naruto assured them. Jaws of earth erupted from the ground and clamped down on one of the shinobi while all attention remained on the teenager, Naruto's earth heart directing the soil from underneath the surface. When the remaining men turned at their comrade's scream, the Jinchuriki propelled himself forward in a burst of wind, the futon, Senpuken swirling around his right arm. He slammed his fist into the leftmost ninja's abdomen, shredding organs and sending blood flying outward in a spray of red. "You were saying?" he mocked as the corpse of the second IWA Nin hit the ground. Slabs of rock rose from the ground and attempted to crush him, but a quick kawarimi with some loose stone allowed him to avoid the assault. Naruto tooted disapprovingly at the remaining IWA Nin. "Well now, that won't do at all," he said. In moments, he was in Jiangu's long-armed form, his lightning and fire mask situated in the spread of threads at his back. "Much better," he hissed sadistically through the tongue of threads sprouting from his mouth. Soon, there was nothing left in the area but a bunch of corpses. "Well, that was fun," he commented, allowing his body to come back together and the earth heart to return to its place on his back. He turned his head to face southeast. "Time for the real trials to begin." With that, he took off in the direction of the land of fire. "Hey Naruto!" "Ga!" Surprised by the appearance of a small green chameleon on his shoulder, the teen was caught off guard as a massive purple projectile flew at him. Instinctively, he leaned backwards to avoid the object, but combined with the shock of the reptile's sudden arrival, lost his footing in the liquid his feet were entrenched in and fell on his back. The reptile moved a bit higher on Naruto's shoulder to avoid getting ensnared by the fluid. "You don't seem to be very good at this." "Kamasada," spluttered the blonde. "What are you? How are you?" "Aji-san wants to speak with you," the chameleon informed him. "What now? I'm a little busy here." Kamasada's eyes roved around the forested area. "So I see." Then his right eye focused on Naruto's face. "Hurry it up." Naruto resisted the urge to snatch the diminutive creature up and strangle him. He had been living in the forests of the Land of Fire for about a month, picking off any team of leaf shinobi that crossed his path. The bounties on their heads were irrelevant, though Kakuzu probably would have had a series of heart attacks if he knew that Naruto was more focused on depleting the village's forces and punishing it for its citizens' scorn in the early years of his life. And the taste of vengeance was like honey. Unfortunately, his most recent targets were proving to be more annoying than the others he'd come across up to that point. 2 of the 4 Chunin had gone down easily enough, but the remaining 2 worked well in tandem and had manipulated the terrain to their advantage. One of them, a brunette with long bangs covering his right eye, had spat some weird Suiton ninjutsu over Naruto's feet, which possessed the viscosity of syrup and made moving highly inconvenient. His partner, a dark-haired male with a weird scar on his chin and a strip of bandage crossing from ear to ear over the bridge of his nose, had summoned a giant purple mace with the vague appearance of a conch shell. He had proven to be surprisingly adept at wielding the monstrosity, though it hadn't proven overly effective given Naruto's use of Doton, Doma. While he could have unleashed his full power from the get-go and just wasted everyone, he had developed the rather sadistic habit of toying with his victims, and enjoyed watching them die one at a time. The idea that he was acquiring more and more of Kakuzu's quirks was something he accepted with much chagrin. Naruto lifted an arm out of the viscous fluid, grimacing in disgust as it thickened and held the limb in place. He suddenly regretted never getting a shirt to replace the one that had been ruined shortly after the training trip with Kakuzu and Haiden had begun. It had become pointless to wear one after learning how to extrude the hearts from his body, since the process would rend the garment to shreds, which explained Kakuzu's weird backless top, but he felt highly exposed wearing only the standard ninja pants. The dark-haired shinobi leapt at him, mace in hand to smash it down on his unmoving body. "Okay, no more screwing around." The long suture stretching from clavicle to side, a permanent reminder of his fight against the Otonin years ago, opened up, allowing a stream of black threads to burst forth and spear towards the Chunin. He brought his massive weapon forward to absorb the brunt of the attack, allowing the threads to crash harmlessly into the conch's reinforced shell. That was fine, though. All Naruto needed was a way to stop the man from getting too close so he could have a few seconds to work. A pulsing mass of threads appeared in the opening in his chest, forming a rough approximation of a mouth. Lightning surged forward as his relocated right heart unleashed a massive pillar of electricity. The attack rose high above the tree canopy, a brilliant flash of blue light. "That's gonna attract attention." "Kotetsu!" shouted the other man as his comrade was consumed by the attack. When the technique faded away, a blackened corpse fell into the viscous liquid at Naruto's feet. I'll kill you! Yeah, thought the blonde, rolling his eyes like I haven't heard that before. It was slightly unfortunate that he couldn't actually see what was happening as he was stuck, but he supposed it didn't really matter. In a matter of seconds, the lightning heart had replaced his wind heart as his body's primary one, allowing the latter to emerge from the hole in his chest as a roughly bird-shaped amalgamation of threads. The thread creature opened its approximation of a beak and expelled a rush of slicing wind that carved into the charging Konohanin. He collapsed to the ground, bloody gashes covering his entire body. As the threads returned to his body and his hearts resituated themselves, Naruto let out a brief huff. Well, that was tedious. He shifted his attention to Kamasada, who had remained silent throughout the battle. Now, what do you want? The chameleon released a noise of annoyance. I told you already, Aji-san wants to talk to you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why? Does it matter? Retorted the reptile. He glared at his summon, releasing an annoyed sigh when it didn't seem to affect him. Yeah, well, I'm a bit stuck at the moment. Can you give me a minute to get out of here? Before the ANBU show up? He added mentally. Don't worry about it. Naruto was about to ask what the reptile meant when Kamasada stood on his hind legs and began forming what the blonde could only assume was hand signs. Before he could comment on the absurdity of the chameleon performing the signs, let alone trying to pull off a jutsu, he disappeared. When the ANBU showed up 20 minutes later, all they found was a pool of viscous liquid and the bodies of 4 of their chunin. Meanwhile, Naruto found himself in the midst of a myriad of trees, all varieties of types known to grow in the rainforest. However, instead of a dense canopy of green, the Jinchuriki was surprised to see that the foliage was a plethora of hues. In fact, the leaves seemed to be shifting colors, changing from red to orange to green to purple, and every shade in between. So mesmerized by the unusual sight, he almost missed Kamasada saying, "This is the Bankaku forest. Come on, Aji-san is this way." Yeah, right? He replied automatically. He was still too busy admiring his surroundings to pay more than a cursory glance to where the chameleon was directing him. Eventually, they arrived at a gigantic stone temple, shaded by equally large trees. Kamasada led Naruto inside as the blonde looked around the building, awestruck. A grating voice brought him from his thoughts. Welcome to our abode, Uzumaki Naruto. You seem to have come from some sort of bath. Naruto looked down at himself, grimacing at the goopy liquid stuck to and dripping off his body, as well as his half-naked appearance. My apologies, Shiromori-sama. I was preoccupied when Kamasada found me. The chameleon boss chuckled. No apologies are necessary. The fault of the timing lies with me. Naruto inclined his head in a sign of humble acceptance. It was one thing to be rude to Kakuzu, who deserved Naruto's snide remarks and often seemed to thrive on the blonde's feistiness. It was quite another to be ungracious to a creature who could literally squash him like a bug. Especially after how helpful his tribe had been on Naruto's journeys. If you say so, Shiromori-sama. May I ask why I've been summoned to your home? Yes, to business. Many decades ago, the Kubasaki clan ruled the land of Nek by way of its contract with my family. Because of the closeness between the Kubasaki clan and the chameleons, every new leader was summoned to the Bankaku forest to learn some of the secrets of our tribe. I have decided that it is time to extend you, our new summoner, the same opportunity. Are you interested in learning the techniques of the chameleons, Uzumaki Naruto? The blonde merely grinned in response. Danzo slammed his fist on his desk in frustration. He had lost count of how many reports had been delivered to him with the same general message. Another team of Konohanin had been found within the borders of the Land of Fire, dead. The deaths of shinobi were not exactly uncommon occurrences, but it was strange to have so many of them occur while in friendly territory and not during wartime. Most of the teams were squadrons of Chunin, or the occasional Jonin-led teams of Genin, but 1 or 2 times he had lost a well-trained group of Tokubetsu Jonin or higher-level ninjas sent out on solo missions. Danzo didn't really mourn the loss of those people. Shinobi were tools to serve their leader, after all, but it was getting rather aggravating to have to act more cautious with his mission assignments. As there was no real pattern to the attacks with regards to direction, he couldn't determine if the situation was caused by one of the other nations trying to create a weak point in Konoha's defenses, or someone else's personal vendetta. Lack of follow-up attacks on Konoha directly and reports from Tenzo suggested the latter. The loss of the score of ANBU he had dispatched 2.5 years ago had been documented in a letter by Tenzo, who had stumbled upon the scene after getting a fix on the Kyuubi's chakra. Though he couldn't say for certain whether or not the Jinchuriki had been responsible for the carnage, the wood user had claimed that many of the corpses littered about the area bore signs of being torn asunder by animalistic claws. The fact that the blonde boy could eliminate an entire platoon of ANBU, one containing Hatake Kakashi, who was a well-known and feared figure throughout the shinobi world, was worrisome, and seemed unlikely unless one took into account his tapping into the Kyuubi's power, something Tenzo could confirm. If Tenzo was a regular ANBU, Danzo would have been concerned about the likelihood of him capturing the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. However, Danzo was counting on the wood user's ability to nullify the Biju's chakra once activated, which would exhaust the Jinchuriki in the process and make him susceptible to acquisition. Of course, that required Tenzo to actually find the boy, and while he had traced multiple uprisings of demonic chakra over the time succeeding the ANBU massacre, every clue ended in a dead end. It spoke of quite a high skill in the prey's tracking and evading abilities to so continuously elude the ANBU member. Assuming the Jinchuriki's involvement in the killings of the Leaf Shinobi, it also offered an explanation as to why so many of the more recent attacks seemed to occur without any of the Konohanin aware of being assaulted until it was too late. It was almost as if the attacker was using an impressive cloaking technique, like Maisegekyo no Jutsu, only close to a level that hadn't been seen since the days of the second Tsuchikage. Danzo scowled at that thought. If the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was truly behind these recent attacks, then his skills were beyond what even Tenzo had informed him of from their limited confrontations. That was problematic, and left the Hokage with very little options. He could either wait for the boy to screw up in some measure or... "Oh!" Danzo uttered, and an adolescent male with long, dark hair and a bird's mask appeared before him, one fist to the ground and head bowed in respect. "There is a shinobi or group of shinobi targeting Konohanin. Find them, and if possible, bring them here. Otherwise, dispose of them." "As you command, Danzo-sama," said the shinobi, and then he was gone. Danzo smirked slightly. It probably wasn't advisable to send a single shinobi out on a mission to incapacitate someone who was likely to target him, but that was the genius of sending Om. Whatever evasive abilities the shinobi killing his tools was using wouldn't work against his root member. Jinchuriki or not, Om would disable the Leaf's enemy before said person knew what had happened to him. Naruto couldn't resist the excited grin that spread across his face at the sound of somebody rushing through the woods. He was crouched at the juncture between a tree's low-hanging bough and trunk, cloaked in Maisegekyo no Jutsu. Things were just way too easy now. His training with the chameleons had gone well enough. Most of their techniques held a basis in their ability to change forms at will, such as Shiromari's long-term tenure as the Kubasaki Castle. They were also very adept with genjutsu and other illusion-related tricks, such as their infamous ability to camouflage seamlessly into their surroundings. As a less-than proficient genjutsu caster, Naruto held very little interest in any of the techniques related to that field his summons were willing to teach him. He had informed them of such in as polite a manner as possible, which had elicited a rumbling laugh from the chameleon boss. They had bypassed any of the illusionary and transformation jutsu and gone straight to the other traits the chameleons were well known for, elongating the tongue, focusing the eyes on 2 separate points. But the trick to learning camouflage had definitely been the most useful, and despite its partial basis in genjutsu, Naruto had insisted on learning it. Maisegekyo no Jutsu normally involved using chakra to alter how light was reflected around the body, simultaneously erasing the user's scent and shadow to further make him even harder to detect. However, The chameleon's version of the hiding with camouflage technique was rather different. It required the user to shroud himself in natural energy, something Naruto had never even heard of before, in order to blend seamlessly with his environment. The technique retained all the positives of the original jutsu with the added benefit of being even more difficult to detect because the chakra being used to cloak the individual didn't actually belong to the user and matched the environment the user was hiding in. The ease with which it had allowed him to sneak up on unsuspecting Konohanin and kill them without them being any the wiser was absolutely ridiculous. A Konohanin wearing an ANBU mask and a cream-colored cloak landed on the ground almost directly beneath Naruto. By the way the shinobi moved, the Jinchuriki guessed his adversary to be male. The blonde flexed his fingers in anticipation as the man beneath him twisted his head to observe his surroundings. Jiangu squirmed beneath his skin, itching for the opportunity to wriggle into a body and pierce, strangle, rip, until there was nothing left but a corpse. Naruto leaped from the tree, silent as a wraith, and descended upon the unknowing man. 10 feet away, the ANBU whipped around, palm thrusting out. Something invisible slammed into Naruto with deadly precision, immediately stopping his heart and causing him to fall to the ground in a boneless heap, the hiding with camouflage technique fading. As Naruto's body assimilated his earth heart, his mind whirled with disbelief at how he had been found out. Hakusho! Intoned a voice, and Naruto instinctively hardened his skin to protect himself as another invisible force blew his body backwards. You might as well get up, continued the ANBU. I can see that your chakra system is still active. Naruto rose to his feet, brushing a hand through his blonde locks to dislodge any dirt. Can you now? Quite an interesting trick. Considering that and your hack technique, you must be a Hyuga. He flexed his hands. Haven't gotten into a fight with one of your kind for some time. I'm not sure how you survived that strike to your heart, but rest assured it won't happen again. He raced forward, palm extended in a gentle fist strike for Naruto's heart. The renegade twisted around the blow, unleashing a flurry of threads to bind the Konohanin and reap his heart. Just as the tendrils wound about the ANBU's body, he became aglow in a shroud of chakra. Jikenpo Ichigekushin, he stated, and the kenjutsu was forcibly repelled from its target. The ANBU member jumped away from Naruto, and for a moment there was silence until he hissed. It is you! Naruto raised an eyebrow. Me? I suspected. Whatever had caused the ANBU's break in control was lost in the next instant. His voice returned to its flat tone. Danzo-sama desires you captured alive, but if you resist, your body will be enough compensation. I feel like I'm missing something. Naruto pondered, tapping a finger to his chin thoughtfully. You seem to know me. Why don't you reciprocate by removing the mask? The ANBU dove forward with another series of gentle fist maneuvers, though he seemed a bit more hostile with his attacks this time, forcing the blonde to practically dance to avoid the strikes. I'll take that as a no. Performing a quick kawarini, he watched from a tree branch as the Hyuga's palm thrust demolished the replacement log into splinters. You seem angry, he observed. The ANBU tilted his head up and sent 2 more chakra-laced, compressed air bullets at him. Most unbefitting of an ANBU, he noted, swinging down to dodge the attacks. Curiosity killed the cat, he thought, hands moving through seals, but I've really gotta know. Sway-tun, Haran Bansho, he announced, water falling from the sky in a torrential downpour. The Hyuga immediately spun himself into a kaiten to repel the deluge, and Naruto used the excess liquid to form several water clones to surround his enemy. They lunged for the ANBU as he came out of his rotation, and Naruto snaked his arms into the battle as the Hyuga dealt with the doppelgangers. Despite the Byakugan's near 360-degree vision, the Hyuga couldn't do anything about the hands reaching for his mask without letting his guard down to the clones. Several palm strikes dispersed the water clones, leaving Naruto to face the full brunt of the ANBU's glowering white eyes settling on him. Hyuga Niji, he realized, recognizing the features of his long-ago Chunin exam opponent. Then he laughed. You're an ANBU now? I guess you became worth something after all. I suspected it was you. Your chakra system is still clouded with those threads, Shinobu of Amigakure, or not? Niji noted, eyes flickering to the slashed hidden leaf hydeate on Naruto's forehead. Mock me as you will. he informed the blonde before settling into an advanced gentle fist stance. But you're within my field of divination. Naruto didn't even have time to curse before Niji was upon him. Hakayaka Nijihachi Sho. The first several blows landed before Naruto regained some semblance of awareness and had the capacity to order Jiangsu to counterattack. When Niji's fingers lanced forward for the next series of strikes, threads burst forth from the suture on Naruto's chest and wrapped around the Hyuga's wrists before they could connect. I'm sure you remember these, he smirked. With a quick motion, the tendrils snapped the Konohanin's joints, rendering his prized taijutsu style useless. Niji showed remarkable restraint for having his wrists broken, merely hissing in pain. His body began to glow with chakra again for another gentle fist art one blow body, but the mask containing Naruto's lightning heart appeared on his shoulder and fired a burst of electricity which paralyzed the other male. I believe that's 2 times you've lost to me now, Naruto mentioned blithely. The Hyuga didn't respond. Naruto hummed thoughtfully. Your emotional control has gone up since we last met. Not that it matters all that much. Now I believe you owe me a heart. Whatever you hope to gain by continuing this crusade against Konoha will not come to fruition, Niji stated, venom lacing his tone. The blonde merely laughed in response. You're a fool. My goals stretch no further than killing the people of your village, which is exactly what I've been doing. There is no deeper purpose. Now go meet the rest of your comrades. More threads squirmed forth from his chest and dug into Niji's, causing the Hyuga's pale eyes to widen. Moments later, the tendrils withdrew, their pumping prize clutched in their grasp. Much better, he sighed, depositing the heart in his chest. Though I probably enjoyed that far more than I should have. Kakuzu has definitely rubbed off on me. His attention was drawn to the Konohanin's corpse, as the seal on his forehead glowed green and his eyes were burned from their sockets. So that's how the seal activates, interesting. He lugged the body upon his shoulder and began walking to the nearest bounty exchange station. Well, Hyuga Niji, let's see how much you're really worth. Name? Uzumaki Naruto. Hair color? Bright yellow. Eye color? Blue. Other distinguishing features? 3 whisker-like markings on either cheek. Former village affiliation? Kanahigakure. Age? 16. Bounty? 70 million. The man looked up at the large amount and raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on the price. Does the shinobi have a Kekkei Genkai or known Kinjutsu? No. Another raised eyebrow, but the man scribbled down the response. He will be listed as an A-rank nuke nin. Is there any other information you can add? He is adept at futon ninjutsu. And? Prompted the man when the other person didn't continue. That is all the information I have. Do you have a picture? The person shook his head. Very well, nodded the man. We will list Uzumaki Naruto in the next edition of the bingo book. Thank you for your report. The Konohanin nodded and left. When he was far enough away from the building, the henge around him dropped. Kakuzu smirked behind his mask. Naruto would raise hell the minute he discovered what the older shinobi had done, but he would eventually come to appreciate the favor Kakuzu had done him. By being listed in the bingo book with such a high bounty and such rudimentary skills, he would quickly become the target of both other mercenaries and the hidden villages alike. Given that the former Takinin had neglected to give the editors information about Jiangsu, Naruto's Jinchuriki status, or the fact that he could freely control all of the elements, Naruto would quickly start accumulating the bounties of people chasing him instead of the other way around. Really, it was quite a time-saving and profitable deed he had just done his pupil. And if Kakuzu got some twisted satisfaction out of pissing the blonde off, well, that was just a bonus. Naruto narrowly dodged a burst of fire and then activated the earth spear technique, bringing his arm up to block a sideways swipe of a Kumonin's sword. Something was wrong. Naruto couldn't decide exactly what that something was, but some sixth sense was telling him that the natural order of the world had been violated. Granted, the fact that he was being attacked by a group of shinobi wasn't all that unusual, considering his profession. But it was strange that the group of cloud shinobi had initiated the assault. especially since he was in the land of grass. This has Kakuzu's fingerprints all over it. I don't know how, but every time something bad happens to me, it's normally because of Kakuzu. He hardened his body again as the first Kumonin exhaled another burst of fire at him. The blonde almost smirked as the flames died out, but a gasp escaped his lips instead as a katana crackling with lightning was shoved from behind into his heart. The dossier said that you were only proficient in futon, but that hardening technique of yours definitely has its roots in doton, whispered a voice in his ear. When he fell face down to the ground, the sword came free with a shick, and its wielder stated aloud, "We've disposed of the Nukenin Uzumaki Naruto. Our mission is complete." Not quite, Naruto thought, burrowing his hands underground via Jiangu. He had been killed enough times over the past several months to know that falling with his hands under his body allowed him to take his enemies by surprise. When the swordsman knelt to pick him up, Naruto acted. Both hands erupted from the ground in different spots, catching two of the Kumonin with uppercuts to the chin. As they were sent flying, the fists opened to grab them each by an ankle. The threads connected to each appendage immediately retracted, bringing both shinobi hurtling towards the earth at an impressive speed. Their heads struck the ground, and then they were motionless. "Man, that never gets old," the blonde snickered. The swordsman, who had turned to his men at the sound of Naruto's fists coming out of the earth, immediately whirled back to the younger male. "Too late!" the Jinchuriki crowed mentally. His wind heart burst forth from beneath the traveler's cloak he wore to conceal the masks on his back and fired a bullet of air that punched a hole in the Kumonin's chest before he could react. And now for number 4, he thought, rising to his feet and recalling the threads. Just as he finished standing, a series of bluish-white beams slammed into his chest. He was pushed back a fair distance, the cloak he'd taken to wearing gaining several holes as the beams scorched through it and burned his skin. "That's new," he remarked. Naruto looked up at the remaining Kumonin, finding both of the man's hands clasped together, a halo of the same bluish-white light surrounding them. An attack that retains some of the piercing abilities of Raitun, but flows like the water of a Suetun technique. I wonder. Kakuzu had lectured him on the different Kekkai Genkai in the ninja world. The lessons had also included a rundown of some of the advanced chakra natures the bounty hunter had come across in his travels. The rarity of such abilities was one of the reasons Tenzo's possession of the should-be-extinct Mokutan techniques had taken Naruto completely by surprise. Barring Tenzo, and potentially Fu, the blue-eyed boy had never really come across any of the other advanced chakra natures. But that strange beam attack definitely seemed to fit Kakuzu's vague description of Kumogakure's rare storm release. Another armada of beams began homing in on his position, forcing the renegade to manipulate the air before him into a dense shield. His blue eyes widened as the attack simply bent around the barrier and converged on his location. Naruto took the attack and came out with a severely tattered cloak and several more burns for his trouble. Fortunately, while the attack seemed to be quite versatile, it lacked a lot of the raw destructive power of the lightning release element that composed it. He raced forward, forcing the Cloud Shinobi to release the seal for his technique and bring forth a katana crackling with lightning. That was fine with Naruto, who immediately held out his right hand and allowed Jiangu to twine itself into its sword form, glowing blue with wind chakra. Steel met the makeshift black blade, causing the Kumonin to grimace as the wind chakra began to bite into his weapon, negating the electricity running along the blade. He reached out with his other hand to shock the blonde into submission, but Naruto met that with a modified whirlwind fist. "Ah!" Naruto tooted mockingly. "I'm a wind specialist, remember? Now, would you like to tell me why you attacked me?" When the man didn't respond, Naruto sighed theatrically. "Well, how about that strange ninjutsu you used? What's your secret to that one?" Again, the blonde was greeted with silence. "Ah well," he continued, "guess I'll just have to find out for myself." Threads tore through the front of his cloak and dove into his opponent's body, wriggling under the skin and aiming for his heart. Naruto relished in the brief moment of shock on the man's face before the tendrils resurfaced with his heart in their grasp. They returned to the blonde's body, displacing his wind heart to his back and depositing the new one within his ribcage. The spasm of pain that accompanied acquiring a new element shuddered throughout his body, causing Naruto to simultaneously grimace and grin. He felt for the elements the organ was aligned with, feeling the soothing calm of Suetun and the fierce prickle of Raitun. My thanks to you. He addressed the body of the Kumonin, releasing it and letting it fall to the ground. He flexed his hands, trying to summon some modicum of Kumogaku's Ranun bloodline, with no effect. This might be trickier than I thought. Then he shrugged. Oh well, plenty of time to learn. Now let's see. He knelt down next to the Kumonin's corpse and rooted through his belongings, but found nothing of interest. Maybe your leader then? He mused. Naruto dragged the body over to the one who had stabbed him. The wielder of the storm release ability might be worth something at a bounty station, even if Naruto had his heart, and searched his person. He discovered a mission scroll and immediately unraveled it, a frown etching his features as he read it. Find and kill Uzumaki Naruto and claim the bounty on his head. Bounty? Then he growled. Kakuzu. I know it's him. Damn him! What did he do? Put me in the bingo book. He took a deep breath. Calm down, he probably knew I'd react like this, which is exactly why he did it. I just need to stay on my guard, figure out a plan. He looked down at his cloak. Get some new clothes, yeah, let's start there. Naruto sighed, hefted the body of the Ranton user on his back, and began walking. 10 seconds later. Kakuzu, you stupid bastard! I'll kill you for this!